it down right. So it is 12:03, August 3rd, 2020. The regular Borough Assembly meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Brandy?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Taylor?
Taylor is excused. He's out tendering today. So with that being said, time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance.
Mr. Mayor, hang on one second. I'm sorry, we forgot Chelsea here. Thank you.
What's that?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we hadn't called Chelsea's name yet. It's all yours.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Chelsea. We have 6 assembly members calling in. So actually, Bob, Assembly Member Lynn is in the assembly chambers with the clerk, and the other 5 are calling in, and Taylor Norheim is excused. So with that being said, it's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So that brings us to item 3 on today's agenda, approval of minutes. There are no minutes presented to us today. So that brings us to item 4, amendment and approval of today's meeting agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve today's meeting agenda as presented unless there are amendments.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Peachy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to hear an update from Assistant Commander Hagerman about how things are going with the COVID response.
Is Carl on the phone? Kirk Johnson?
Yes, he is.
Okay, we can do that under report of other officers. We can do that right after the sanitation study. We'll make that 11B, and please remind me if I forget. Actually, that was a motion. Is there a second to Member Busey's motion?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Clerk call the roll on the proposed amendments to the agenda by adding Assistant Commander Hagerman to report of other officers under section 11, make it 11B.
Jeff?
Clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
If there's no objections, we'll just move forward with that amendment. So all those in favor of that amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that should require a roll call. Okay, so that brings us to the meeting agenda as amended, with adding that one item. Are there any other amendments? Clerk, call the roll on this, though, as the meeting agenda as amended.
Do we not need a motion and a second? We actually never had one.
Okay, I entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for today as amended. Your second.
Second.
Any discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move forward with today's agenda as amended. Next item on today's agenda is item 5, public hearings. There are none today. Bid awards, there were no bid awards today. So that brings us to item 7, which is persons to be heard related to today's agenda. And we're going to do things a little bit different today on the timing of a person testifying. You have 5 minutes, and when you are at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, when you have 30 seconds remaining, you will hear one ding, I believe, Debbie, and then when your 5 minutes is up, there will be 2 dings. So then you will be, your testimony will be completed if you use your whole 5 minutes. With that being said, Debbie, would you ask the operator to unmute the first person?
Yes, Scott, if you could please unmute Sarah Holmgrain.
The line is now open.
Hi, this is Sarah Holmgrain. I'm president of the school board, and I just want to take a minute to address you as a whole. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I wanted to publicly express my support for Superintendent Cliff-Painter's request for funds from the CARES Act. The administrative staff of the district have thoroughly analyzed the guidelines and parameters the state of Alaska Department of Education has put out to help districts get back to school. That document is also known as Smart Start. The Smart Start document has been added to over the last few weeks and has grown from 19 pages to now 46. It is daunting and involves a great deal of care in preparing to open our schools back up to students. Protocols that need to be in place to keep both staff as well as students safer and minimize potential risk is our best hope for getting through the school year with as much face-to-face instruction as possible. Our current budget does not take that into account. It doesn't take into account a pandemic or the extensive guidelines and protocols Smart Start calls for. For the last 18 years or so, the borough's contribution to the district has remained unchanged despite rising costs. We've been an excellent steward of our local tax dollars as well as our state and federal funds we receive to educate Petersburg's children. Please use history to guide your decision-making today. We don't ask for these funds lightly. Extreme care and consideration was done in trying to determine how much would be needed in order to maximize the safety of students and staff and provide an excellent education environment for all students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony today. Debbie, can you unmute the next caller, please?
Yes, Scott, if you could please unmute David Beebe.
The line is now open.
Good afternoon. My name is David Beebe. I speak on behalf of myself. I'm in full support of adopting Emergency Ordinance 2020-19, which enables the government to act in the best interest of maintaining a healthy and civil society. An emergency is defined as a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. I am truly humbled to the point of awe in expressing my fullest gratitude to our public servants who respond to emergencies. I salute our fire and EMT volunteers, our police, our medical center staff, and too many others to name, who will all keep our community functioning during states of emergency, whether an emergency of an individual or an emergency of the whole. Two individuals in particular come to mind in this very different state of emergency: Carl Hagerman and Debbie Thompson, who have been standing bravely and selflessly enduring, arguably, in the most fierce political crossfire in the history of Petersburg. We are now a severely divided community and need to remember Debbie and Carl as individuals, maintain an uncommon sense of personal integrity, and great personal sacrifice for the benefit of the whole. All individuals who act selflessly for the benefit of the whole are real-life public heroes. They are heroic because they don't allow fear to obstruct reason using denial. This is most urgently obvious when confronted by any faction of society which is either unwilling or rendered incapable of understanding in denial of the basic premise of living systems theory. Among the most important can be boiled down to the fact that threats to individual members of society are actually threats to society as a whole. The current global health emergency and global climate emergency are the quintessential examples in which denialism by a relatively small portion of the population pose potentially severe existential consequences to the whole. Abiding by the recommendations of the best minds, joining in international scientific and medical consensus becomes not a matter of opinion based upon denial, but a matter of survival as a community and as a nation of the international community. Let us hope reason prevails over fear by providing the government emergency powers to protect the whole. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your testimony. Debbie, Clerk Dawson, will you please unmute the next caller?
Yes, Scott, please unmute Erica Klunt-Painter.
Speak on this open.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear here.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. I appreciate you all giving me an opportunity to speak today. I know this is coming up later in the agenda regarding the school district's request for CARES Act funding. So I appreciate being able to potentially address some of the questions and concerns ahead of that decision. So I think what I'll do is actually just go ahead and read through some information that might be helpful to you. I truly understand how frustrating this is for everyone, and I wish I had a very simple answer to a complex issue. Our goal throughout these months of planning has been to reopen the buildings to as many students and staff as possible in the safest manner possible. It has been a roller coaster ride, to say the least, with varying guidance documents being released throughout the summer, disrupting plans and requiring constant flexibility. The latest guidance, as referenced by Sarah Holmgren, was updated by the Department of Health and Social Services and just released last Tuesday, and grew from 11 pages in May to 45 pages in July. Due to the mounting restrictive recommendations and necessary protocols, our hands become increasingly tied. The recommendation for smaller groups in closed environments has not changed throughout, so we continue to think of creative ways to do this. Bringing 450 students and 80-plus adults into these school buildings will constitute the largest social gatherings in Petersburg since March, and it is our responsibility to do it with as much care and attention to detail as possible, while still providing high-quality learning opportunities. This latest update came with additional guidelines related to class and cohort sizes, masking and social distancing guidance, quarantine requirements, and symptom-free policies. The challenge is not just opening up the school buildings, but keeping the buildings open with all of the public health mandates and requirements. How do we sustain what we are planning to do? In the event of likely classroom or school disruptions due to the symptom-free policy, potential quarantines of students and staff, and changing risk levels in the community. This is the reason we are suggesting to the school board and our community that we start slowly. In our meeting with PMC staff, we all agree that this is our first attempt, and we will expand on the successes and shift away from failed policies. PMC does not dictate our schedule, but provides medical consultation for our educational scenarios. I do think the overall success and or failure of school opening will depend largely on what happens outside of school, as far as numbers of cases, community transmission, etc. If we continue to stay in the green zone, we anticipate expanding in-person learning opportunities to our students once we establish protocols in the schools and everyone knows how to safely function. In addition, the district is also required to provide a robust virtual remote learning opportunity for students who choose this or should the risk level change. Essentially, we are preparing for two complex systems at the same time, in-person and virtual. Implementing both of these systems at the same time requires additional staff to provide instruction, support for special needs and high-risk students, and to implement additional cleaning and disinfecting services. Both of these scenarios also require additional technology equipment, remote learning solutions, PPE, cleaning solutions and equipment, and hygiene supplies. It is extremely expensive to prepare for and operate two systems like this. I truly sympathize with the child care issue that has been discussed in the community, and I understand the frustration. I agree that the CARES Act funding could be used to offer child care credits for families in need. I would advocate that it not come out of the school's request, but that will be up to the Assembly. We have been working with preschool and child care agencies and will continue to do so to provide coordination and cooperation for children and families. We want to work together with our partners in the community. We will provide extended virtual and packet kit learning opportunities for students depending on their age and developmental level, and outside adult support. This is if we end up having to do a half-day schedule or an alternating day. We know this will be a lot for our families, and I truly hope our community will come together to support smaller pods of students within family and friend groups. Our job as educators will not stop when students are not in our physical presence. We are committed to the training necessary to improve distance instructional practices for all teachers and to support our families in this learning process as well. It is likely there will be times throughout the school year where in-person learning is disrupted due to regular sickness, quarantines for teachers or students due to travel or close contact, etc. This is truly going to be a year like no other. As far as how many students and families will choose to homeschool rather than participate in the district's virtual learning platform, we do not have final numbers yet. We will be sending out information, hopefully this afternoon, related to these potential plans, protocols, and surveys for parents. We have a lot to figure out with transportation, food services, support services, in addition to education as usual. I truly wish we could be returning to a normal, quote-unquote, system, but it is just not possible in these times, and we really have to come to grips with that. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, and I am available for questions if you need that later in the agenda. Thank you.
You're probably muted, Mayor Jensen.
Okay, there we go. So thank you for your explanation of the request and for being willing to stay on the line to field questions from the Assembly. And I think it would be best if we did that when we discussed the resolution. Could you please unmute the next speaker, Person?
So I believe that we have gone through the speakers for persons to be heard related. I do have a couple speakers for the next agenda item, persons to be heard unrelated.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with the first speaker there, please.
Thank you, Scott. If you could please unmute Candy Woodworth.
Hello, my name is Candy Woodward, and I speak for Frederick Point East property owners. Dear Mayor and Assembly members, in 2012, Frederick Point East was incorrectly placed in Service Area 1 at Borough formation when the former city of Petersburg city limits were used for the initial service area boundary as Charter Section 14.02b. This action conflicted with Section 14.04, which reads, quote, service areas shall be established according to criteria of need and economic operating efficiency and shall comprise the area to which the services shall be provided, unquote. Service areas provide services and mill rates reflect those services that are provided. Unlike the assessment of property values performed by the state assessor, which provides tax notice and appeal guidelines for property owners, the annual mill rate determination by the Assembly lacks transparency and accountability. The property owners are given no opportunity for review and appeal. The Assembly has no requirement to meet with the property owners to resolve the issues. In the Frederick Point East situation, the Assembly has failed to set up a meeting with the property owners as requested and has not responded formally to the Frederick Point East appeal letter dated August 12, 2019. To avoid confusion, we are not the Frederick Point North subdivision located near Sandy Beach. Frederick Point East is not contiguous with town, but is located approximately 10 miles from Petersburg in the Tongass National Forest. We are remote. The 55 lots are used as seasonal recreational use only, with one couple, Don and Jane Cummins, residing full-time. Access roads that link the subdivision to major roads are non-existent. The closest road, Forest Service Road 6204, located approximately 1 mile away, is not maintained or snowplowed by the municipality, further hampering a quick emergency response for fire and EMS responders. Police, on the other hand, have relegated their duties of servicing Frederick Point East to the state trooper. No trash service, no construction inspections. According to the Charter 14.05b, the Assembly has the responsibility to supervise furnishing borough services in Service Area 1. Frederick Point East is not receiving the services that are afforded to the other properties in Service Area 1, yet we are paying the same mill rate as in town. Even in light of these facts, on July 20th, at the Assembly meeting, after the statements of Clerk Thompson, the Assembly promoted a false narrative that the removal of Frederick Point East from Service Area 1 would require the use of Section 14.03b, 1 and 2. And it would take 2 separate ballots, and it would be difficult and time-consuming. Upon closer inspection of Section 14.03, the section is specifically tailored for the area-wide basis properties only. The initial Service Area 1 properties are supposed to have services already in place, and they are not considered area-wide properties. Section 14.03 does not apply. Continued misinformation and delays by the borough have hindered any resolution. The fact is that it is within the responsibility and the duty of the Assembly itself to make corrections in the charter when errors are found. Instead, Frederick Point East property owners have been confronted with the borough's unwillingness to address the unfair property tax issue, even though Member Mucci estimated that there would be a minimal reduction of only about $12,000 to the general fund. Unlike the assessment of property values performed by the state assessor, which provides tax notice and appeal guidelines for property owners, the mill rate determination by the Assembly lacks transparency and accountability. The property owners are given no opportunity or formal procedures for review or appeal. There has been no borough action to meet with property owners as requested. Therefore, Frederick Point East property owners are appealing the 2020 Assembly determination of the mill rates because they do not reflect actual borough services provided. The Frederick Point East property owners request that the Assembly give Frederick Point East fair property taxes by removing Frederick Point East subdivision from Service Area 1. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk Thompson, is there anyone else that wants to speak on items under today's agenda?
Yes, Scott, please unmute David Beebe.
The line is open.
Good afternoon. My name is David Beebe. I'm speaking for myself. The private meeting of July 7, 2020, called by the Mayor of Petersburg Borough with Representative Don Young and Senator Stedman, cited the Open Meetings Act limits to frustrate public access and public process of open government. The Open Meeting Act intent is defined as, quote, all meetings of a governmental body of a public entity of the state are open to the public, end quote. Instead, this was used to frustrate its purpose to authorize a private meeting with visiting public officials. I now cite selected quotes from the state document explaining the Open Meetings Act regarding this matter. I quote, however, when the private discussions have the purpose and effect of eliminating public discussion of the same issues and predetermining the outcome of a vote, then the public policy behind the Open Meetings Act is frustrated. End quote. Further, as to question of whether a quorum or less than a quorum could constitute a meeting, the Alaska Supreme Court states, quote, given the strong statement of public policy in the Open Meetings Act, the question is not whether a quorum of a governmental unit was present at a private meeting. Rather, the question is whether activities of public officials have the effect of circumventing the Open Meetings Act, end quote. Now, the state policy of law is clear. Government actions should be taken openly and deliberations conducted openly. And the right of the people to remain uninformed shall be protected so the people may retain control over the government, end quote. So regarding the right of the people to remain informed shall be protected, the August 1st Assembly agenda included the mayor's report, and after denying that was on the agenda, the mayor claimed the radio was present at that private meeting in his report. So I contacted the radio to request a copy of the recording of that meeting, and here's what I learned. No one with the radio was at that private meeting of public servants. When the radio news department asked, the mayor provided no time nor place of the meeting. The meeting was not advertised. And when the radio news department asked for an interview during Young's visit, it was declined. In the last 2 decades, Alaska, among all 50 states, has been at the bottom of the nation's barrel of providing tax revenues to fund the social contract. Yet Alaska has been at the top of the pork barrel of federal subsidies per capita. Where exactly has this twisted policy gotten Alaskans? The last 2 decades have seen Alaska at the top of the nation in rates of domestic violence and sexual violence and suicide and governmental corruption, to name just a few. The refusal of state legislatures to provide reliable tax revenues engineered these crises along with the gutting of our social contract. So $40 million of state funds set aside before our fiscal crisis by Stedman and Young's Roads to Nowhere project might have been reallocated to public health, public education, public transportation, public broadcasting, public libraries, or our public social safety net, but were denied. The last 6 years of public testimony, racked by fears and tears, fell on the deaf ears of Don Young and Bert Stedman. Their $40 million assistance in recreation road to nowhere is wildly unpopular in all 3 of our directly affected communities. This is why they refuse to face the general public, and this is why the intent of the Open Meetings Act was used as a cover. And this is why the letter and intent of Alaska Administrative Procedures Act was subverted, which states, I quote, "It is the policy of the state that the people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know." Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Clerk Thompson, will you unmute the next caller, please, if there are any?
Let's see. We have just had someone sign on. I'm not sure if he wants to speak, but we're going to give him the opportunity. Scott, please unmute Harvey Gilliland.
Your line is open. Okay, so this is Harvey Gilliland. Can I speak to you folks, please?
As long as it's on an item related to today's agenda or unrelated to today's agenda, Harvey, you have 5 minutes and you may proceed.
Okay, well, it's related to the Frederick Point East issue about property taxing. And I can't begin to say everything that Mrs. Whitworth said, but I pretty much agree, and I think it's atrocious that those folks out there have been paying a mill rate that's comparable to getting water and sewer and garbage and electrical service. And I think it's further distressing that at the last meeting that voting on that issue was postponed until it was said that more information could be gathered. I don't understand what further information there could be. It's just been very unfair for a long, long time, and I think that ought to be changed. So, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today, Mr. Gilliland. Are there any other
It looks like that's all, Mayor Jensen.
Okay, so we will move forward. That brings us to item 9, Board, Commission, and Committee reports. There are none today. Item 10, consent agenda. There is nobody, there's nothing on the consent agenda. 11, report of other officers. We have a presentation by Public Works Director Cotta. He will update us on the results of a recent rate study performed for the sanitation department. So, Mr. Cotta, will you please proceed?
Okay, can everybody hear me all right?
I can.
Okay. So I just wanted to give everybody a quick update on the rate study and hopefully get some input from the Assembly on how to present this information to the Assembly and the public in the future. The rate study is done, and what you have before you today is just a very brief summary of the information within that study. If you'll recall, we looked at 4 different options for recycling as part of this rate study, and those options definitely impact rates depending on which recycling scenario is chosen. So just briefly through the 4 scenarios that were looked at, one would be maintaining the existing commingled recycling program with curbside pickup. We found after running all the numbers that was about a 5% per year increase that would be needed to support that program moving forward. Of course, during this current year, we've frozen rates just in light of everything that's going on. But we'll be looking at possible rate increases starting next budget year. The second of the scenarios we looked at was a reduced frequency. So we continue doing commingled recycling, continue curbside pickup, but we would be eliminating lower value commodities such as mixed paper, for instance, that's a lot of volume and very low or has a negative value at times. We think by eliminating some of those lower value commodities that we could go to an every other week pickup. Another thing that every other week pickup allows us to do is to basically go to a 2-truck fleet instead of 3. We still have 3 trucks, but we would be keeping our older truck essentially in reserve as strictly as a backup unit in case one of the other trucks went down. So we could take that 3rd truck out of the replacement schedule, which would definitely save the department some money. And also, we save money because we wouldn't be running as many routes, and we would probably be getting more money for our recycling because we would be eliminating those commodities that are kind of dragging the value down of the recycling stream. So that would be the second scenario that we looked at. The third scenario would be moving to a drop-off program for recyclables. So we would be eliminating, go ahead. Did somebody have a comment?
No, can you please continue with your presentation, Mr. Scott?
Sure. And I should go back to the second option we looked at, the reduced frequency. I may not have talked about the rate that would be required to support that. What we determined through the rate study process was that it would be about a 3% per year rate increase that would be needed to support that second option of reduced frequency commingled pickup. The third option we looked at was the drop-off site or sites where there would be no curbside collection. We would continue our recycling program as a drop-off program only. That results in some further cost reductions, of course, but also would lower our recyclable volume. We get less participation. FCS group that did our rate study said that they've noticed that in other communities that have gone from a commingled program to a drop-off program, the participation does go down. There's no way in their view, just because you're reducing the convenience of it, people are having to make a trip to a drop-off site as opposed to just putting something in a blue can and setting it out every week. And so your participation goes down, but your costs for the program also go down. So that option, moving to a drop-off site or sites, could be supported with about a 2% annual increase per year. And again, that's after this year. There are no increases this year. This would be starting next budget year. The last option we looked at during the rate study was a no recycling option, and which would be basically to eliminate all of our recycling and go to just garbage, shipping it all out as garbage. That would definitely be a controversial way to go. There's a lot of people in the community that support recycling, that want to continue recycling. The flip side of that is that a no recycling option lowers our costs to where, we still need a rate increase, but it's a pretty low rate of increase. It's about a 1% per year, which we need to bump the rates up to support the department. So anyway, those are the four options, just kind of a brief description of those options. Obviously, there's a lot of numbers and a lot of data behind each one of those options. And so what I was hoping today is that the assembly would have some discussion, and maybe we could talk about how to present, how to disseminate all of this data to the assembly and to the public so that we can make the best decision for the community.
Okay, thank you.
That's the end of, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say that's the end of my report, and I'll be happy to take any questions you guys have.
Okay, thank you for your presentation today. I just, seeing how it wasn't really listed on today's agenda for us to take action, I can see fielding questions from the assembly, and then it sounds like it's a pretty detailed report, and would probably take lots of time, and it would take a lot of public involvement in this potentially controversial topic. So I don't know that we can take any action today. But any other assembly members have questions of Mr. Collins?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Oh, yes, Member Lynn.
Yeah, I have three questions. The first one, Chris, would I assume then that using reduced frequency, that we're really we're talking a net 2% increase to do the reduced frequency, because even without it, you say you're still going to have a 1% increase. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. My second. Okay, thank you. My second question then is, if we were to reduce the frequency, will that allow more time? Backing up, one of the things we talked about is when we put in the new conveyor and the equipment, we needed more time to do the maintenance on that. If we did the reduced frequency or something less than that, would that give us more time to keep that equipment in good working order, and would that also allow us to keep the facility open longer?
Yes, the answer is definitely yes, to being able to keep our equipment maintained, with, I guess, more regularity. It would give us time to actually schedule in some additional maintenance time that we just don't have right now because our pickup schedule is so tight. As far as, increased hours for the facility, that's something we could look at too. That would be a definite possibility if we're reducing frequency.
Thank you.
You must be muted, Mayor Jensen.
I've got to push the right button, I guess. So, Chris, one reply to Member Lynn about more maintenance if we did the reduced frequency. Are we performing regular maintenance on the new baler facility currently?
Yeah, we are. We've gotten, we're doing it, and we're kind of fitting it in where we can. So it's not necessarily going according to, every 2 weeks we do such and such. We're doing the best we can. The guys are, like I say, they're stretched pretty thin, just doing pickups because we're doing, full collection, all of our routes for garbage and recyclables. But yeah, we did some oil sampling, and we're doing, the daily things that need to be done to keep the machine up. We're coming up on some bigger service items, and we may be, bringing somebody in to do some of those things, especially if we can't allocate enough time for our crew to do them. But yeah, reducing frequency would give us, hours every week where we could devote time to either maintenance on the machinery or maintenance on the grounds. That's another thing that, we have a lot of trouble trying to fit into our schedule. Is just doing things like weed eating and pressure washing and so forth. If we freed up a little time for our staff, we'd have more time for those things, and that would be a good thing for the department.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Cotta for the Assembly before we move on to the next item? Okay, that's number 11.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, number 18.
Thank you. How much do you pay for this one-page study that I have in front of me? It's not even a study, it's just a piece of paper. How much do we pay for this?
Well, the rate study, was done for 3 different departments, water, wastewater, and sanitation. It was $42,000 for the study for all 3 departments, so roughly $14,000 per department. And, as I said earlier, that sheet of paper you have in front of you is a very condensed summary of what was done. There's a lot of information in that study. It's really going to require, I think, probably a separate meeting or a series of meetings to go through all of the data and background information that was used to put together this summary. So, does that answer all of your questions, Member Mucci?
Absolutely not. How can I be expected to make a decision on whether or not we're going to have a work session based on a one piece of paper that talks? It doesn't really do much. It just helps me understand that the less we do collecting recyclables and garbage, the more time you have to maintain the equipment up at the baler facility. This is totally, for me, this is inappropriate here. I can't be asked to respond to a question from the public based on this one piece of paper. I've been waiting for this document for quite a while. And to get a one-page synopsis that I can barely understand, it's a bit insulting to me. We're trying to sort out how we can either save money with the recycling program or the sanitation department, but this, in some of your comments, it talks about if we reduce recycling or sanitation pickups, that you'll have more time to maintain equipment. Well, why have the equipment if we're not going to do any recycling or pick up the sanitation stuff? I have this one-page document provides no information to me. And I'm hoping, you might be giving this one page out to the community so they can understand what this is, but, if we pay $43,000 or $14,000 for the sanitation thing, I would hope that I get a chance to look at that. I mean, unless you're going to feed me the information to try and help me make a decision based on what your preferences are. I'm not very impressed with this one-page document. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mucci. I think, well, like Mr. Cotta said, this is just a preliminary 10,000-foot view, or whatever you want to call it. And then the rest of the information is going to be presented to us when the Assembly decides to ask for it, basically. It sounds like to me, and then get the public involved and then go over it in detail at probably a public work session or maybe a number of meetings. So I know this has been a long time coming, and but it sounds like this is just very small amount of the information that we will get presented when we get the whole study. As far as being able to look at the whole study, I don't know the answer to that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. But, we are presented with information all the time about stuff to read, about studies that come in, whether it's a motor pool study or water rate study. I mean, but, how can I move forward with this based on this one-page document? I mean, the community needs, or I need to at least look at the entire document so I can understand where we're headed here. I mean, if we need a work session, great, but based on this one-page document, I can't make any decisions. I wouldn't expect anybody else to make a decision, but, this is substandard here. I mean, I can't expect the public to expect me to make a good decision based on this one-page document. And there's not even a date on it. I have no idea when this was done. I mean, there's no date.
May I respond to...
Hang on one second. Hang on one second, Mr. Cotter. We're kind of going in circles. I think maybe the thing to do, Member Mucci, would be that, try to get these meetings scheduled. But I think they were hoping to do them later in the fall, but I don't know that. Mr. Cotter, what was your response going to be?
Well, I actually just wanted to clarify some things. We are absolutely going to provide the full body of the study to the Assembly, to the press, to anyone in the public that wants to see it. My summary today was just basically to let everybody know here are the numbers that we drew looking at the different options. There's no way to do a short summary and be able to do a 5-minute soundbite and have the Assembly equipped with enough information to decide anything on this subject. The discussion and decision, if you will, that I was maybe hoping to get out of this presentation was simply to decide on a format for presenting all the information. There's a lot of information. The Assembly has a lot of other more important things to deal with today on this agenda. I didn't want to take up the entire meeting with recycling issues. I was just hoping that we could maybe decide on, okay, we're going to do a work session, or we'll dedicate a portion of a future meeting, a regular Assembly meeting, to doing a full presentation of all the study data. There's no attempt here to just do a two-sentence breakdown and then get the Assembly to vote on a rate scenario. Absolutely not. This is way too involved, and it's too important to too many members of the community to try and rush anything through. So I just wanted to clarify that, since Member Mucci seems to think that there's some effort on our part to withhold information. That's absolutely not what's going on here.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, just to avoid the argument, I would suggest that we would possibly put this topic on the next meeting as a discussion item to
Mr. Mayor?
I will respond. I will give you the floor in a second, Member Mucci, until then we can discuss it and then do what Mr. Cobb is looking for, some kind of direction as to how to present this. Member Ducey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate what Chris is trying to do, but, whether or not it's a work session or a discussion item, I can't decide now whether or not we want to have a work session. I hope we get to that point, but I would just hope that we get all the information that we can and let the assembly kind of choke on it. It's too much, but, the information, this one page here is not sufficient. If we can kick this can down the road, that's great, but I'd like to look at the details of this as soon as we can, so I can spend, between now and the next assembly meeting, just some time just to kind of take my time and read what the FCS group has to say. No, I appreciate what Chris is doing, but this one page isn't really helping me much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion by any other assembly members or questions for Mr. Cotta from the assembly on this sanitation rate study? Okay, that brings us to the new item on today's agenda, 11B. Mr. Hagerman, the incident commander, will give us an update on the COVID issue.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Thank you. So just put together a quick report for the Assembly and the public today. One of the main things that we're dealing with as an EOC team is the changes to State Mandate 10, the interstate travel mandate. As many people know, the governor made an announcement last week that starting August 11th, there will be changes to the mandate that eliminates the possibility of a quarantine for anybody coming in from out of state, any non-residents coming in from out of state, and requires those non-residents to get a test 72 hours before departure for Alaska. There was very little detail on that plan, and so the staff has been putting together information for all the different communities that this affects, Petersburg being one of them. And we did get a brief note, still no written plan from the state, but we did get an email this morning from the staff at DHSS that says they're going to be moving towards a travel portal system, which is basically an electronic system that all passengers coming into the state will must access, and provide their the results of their tests. It'll have access to a voucher system. Still not 100% sure on what that looks like and how it's going to work, but that seems to be the direction they're going. So we'll be, as a EOC team and the greeters and screeners, testers at the airport will be undergoing some changes, but the extent of that isn't fully known yet. I wanted to mention that the community protective plan that I'm working on is moving forward. I got a first really rough draft out to members of the team and hospital staff, and received some good feedback from that, so I'm hoping to get a second draft out on that this week for internal review. As predicted, I think the hardest part of that is to define the metrics and trigger points for moving from one status risk level to another. And it's, of course, very important to get that right. We don't want to be bouncing back and forth between green and yellow, or yellow and orange or red, any more than we absolutely have to. It needs to be a fairly stable system so that people have time to react and respond adequately in consideration of what the virus is doing in Petersburg. Happy to say that as of today, we're still looking very good. We have 2 active cases on the books for Petersburg, but those were the 2 non-residents that basically just passed through from the airport to the harbor and then left. And we did get information that those 2 travelers are in Juneau now item that we've heard a lot about. It's been, I think, a pretty common topic of discussion around town is the post office situation. Looking at it from an EOC perspective, it is definitely a problem to have that many people congregated in an enclosed space. And we definitely feel for the postmaster and her staff of one right now, trying to deal with the mail and the packages that are coming in. So we did push out some suggestions for the community just today. Hopefully that will allay some concerns from the public, and we'll be able to support our post office until they get some additional help, which hopefully will be middle of this month. Also wanted to mention that the EOC will fully support whatever decision is made by the Assembly for a community meeting regarding the permanent civil emergency ordinance, and we'll wait to hear direction on that and respond accordingly. I think that's my report for today, Mr. Mayor. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Carl, for that report. Any questions of Mr. Hagerman today?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Mr. Lynn?
Yeah, Carl, I've seen at least one memo from the state regarding what our authorities might be to require or to enforce different kind of things like masking and so forth. Was there any discussion in your last week's meeting about these authorities and any further follow-up from the state attorney general's office?
You know, I also saw a memo regarding that issue, and I think it's pretty clear that the governor's office has taken the tack of fully supporting local municipalities in their efforts to protect their populations, and is actually urging local assemblies and elected bodies to take any action that they feel is appropriate. And so much so that, the legal department states lawyers Attorney General have come out with some information asserting that, and just to make sure that all of the communities know that they have that power and authority to move forward with protective actions as they see fit. As an EOC team, we haven't discussed the need to take action. In Petersburg, the Assembly is the elected body, and as has been the case throughout the pandemic, if there are larger issues, mandates that need to be recommended or should be recommended to the Assembly, they're elevated at that level. But at this time, I'm working on a community plan. That's in my mind, that's the next large issue for the Assembly to consider. But it is, I guess, important to point out to the Assembly that the state is recognizing that the body does have the authority to take action, and is encouraging that all over the state.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Hagerman, today?
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci?
Thank you. I guess in a follow-up to Councilmember Lynn's question, I mean, I'm not sure if he's talking about mandating masks, but I mean, if we do end up headed that way, where do we deal with the enforcement issue on some of these ideas? Thank you.
That is a very good question. And enforcement is kind of the crux of the problem of developing mandates in the first place. If you don't have enforcement worked out ahead of time, then it's really the mandates are very hollow, and they don't hold any weight. We've seen it with the state of Alaska's mandates throughout the pandemic, that even though they were backed up by a substantial fine and in jail time if they were violated. There's been no enforcement whatsoever. And EOC has asked the state a couple times as the situation has changed over the course of the summer if enforcement was going to be part of the state's response. And both times the answer has been no, that it's an education process and that the state is expecting the population to do the right thing. And while that's a great thought, and I think that most people, knowing, getting the information of the best practices and recommendations from the state of Alaska, will try to follow them. There are a number of people that won't, without some teeth. And so, back to the question of enforcement in Petersburg, if local mandates are enacted, there will need to be some discussions about that and some direction given to our local police department for the expectations for enforcement and what that looks like. It's a very large and touchy issue, and if there are mandates put in place that do require masking, for instance, I think the example that Juno has given of a very low fine is a good example, and it provides that teeth, but it's not $500 or $1,000 every time you violate it. That's a little bit unreasonable, I believe, and I think most people would probably agree with that. But nobody wants to get a $25 ticket either. I think from what I've heard from travelers that Juno has been successful with their masking mandate overall. I have no idea if they're writing citations up there or not, but from what I've heard from other people that have gone through Juno, that there's a lot of compliance right now, and so that's a good thing. Did that answer your question, Member Rita?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Any other questions of Mr. Hagerman today? I guess I just have one, Carl. When do you think the Community Protective Plan will be, presented to the Assembly for our review? Are we a couple weeks out, or?
I would hope, I would hope that by the next Assembly meeting that I'll have a draft for you to look at. I will not be in town for that meeting, but I hopefully will be able to call in still and participate. We're getting closer, but it is a very delicate situation. Coming up with the actions that should occur at each level it wasn't that hard, but as I said, the trigger points and the metrics is tricky. The state of Alaska is spending some time to try and provide more detailed information to our state via their website. And I was involved in a meeting with Dr. Zink last week where she explained the added detail that they're trying to provide, so that mostly so that communities can develop protective plans and have information that will guide them on when to step up protective actions and when you're able to relax those actions. So a lot of detail, but to answer your question, I'm hopeful to get a second draft out for review this week, and if I have any luck and the time to complete it, maybe a draft to the Assembly by the second meeting in August.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I'll ask one more time, are there any other questions from Assembly members? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hagerman.
You're welcome.
That brings us to report of other officers continued. That's the mayor's report. The first topic on there is I'd like to wish condolences on behalf of the Petersburg community. We wish to extend sincere condolences to the families of the 4 young adults involved in the vehicle accident last week. Words cannot express the heartache. We stand in support with Borough Assembly Meetings Forum. There was an article in the paper a couple weeks ago that insinuated that we were meeting improperly because of ordinances that have expired. And so I just wanted to dig into that a little bit. And one of the things that people were having trouble with around town was the one comment that since no one objected, then it's okay. But there's more to it than that as an explanation. So I talked with the attorney, met with the manager and the clerk, and this is what we came up with, and this is the response to the people concerned about our actions. In response to numerous inquiries that I received, I wanted to address the issue of assembly members in person versus teleconference appearance at assembly meetings and provide the public with additional information to address these questions. In response to this kind of gives a little timeline here. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions on public gatherings, the Assembly unanimously adopted on March 16, 2020, Emergency Ordinance number 2020-07, which amended Borough Code Section 3.08.080 to establish a quorum of the Assembly by teleconference. On March 20th, 2020, the Assembly unanimously adopted Emergency Ordinance 2020-08, which established civil emergency provisions under Chapter 3.72 of the Code. These provisions were continued by Emergency Ordinance 2020-17, adopted May 18, 2020, and again by Emergency Ordinance 2020-22, adopted July 24, 2020. On April 3rd, 2020, under the authority of the civil emergency provisions of Chapter 3.72.060 of the Borough Code, Incident Commander Hagerman issued Public Health Mandate number 3. This suspended in-person participation at assembly meetings. This applies to both assembly members and members of the public. Public Health Mandate number 3 was extended on June 1st, 2020 and amended on June 15th, 2020 to continue suspension of in-person participation by the public, but to allow for assembly member in-person participation at the discretion of the individual members. Public Mandate number 3 supersedes any conflicting local ordinance, which would include the ordinance calling for in-person attendance at assembly meetings by at least 4 members. Upon realization that Ordinance 2020-07, which made the technical amendments to Section 3.08080, had expired on April 30th, 2020, the Assembly adopted emergency ordinances number 2020-20 and 2020-21, which once again made technical amendments to that section. These were adopted to clarify the Assembly's intent in this area. However, Health Mandate number 3 already addresses this issue. On July 24, 2020, the Assembly adopted Emergency Ordinance number 2020-22, which continues the civil emergency provisions and specifically allows for establishment of a quorum of the Assembly via teleconference. Ordinance 2020-22 will expire September 21st, 2020. Accordingly, the Borough Assembly did not violate Borough Code by allowing a quorum to be established via teleconference after the expiration of Ordinance 2020-07. During all Assembly meetings, the Assembly fully complied with Health Mandate 3, as well as the Open Meetings Act, and the public was able to participate by email or telephone, and certainly did so. This information has been verified with the Borough Attorney. And the next topic on the Mayor's report today is the meeting that I attended with Southeast Mayors. We met with Governor Dunleavy on July 21st. He contacted governors from all over the state, district by district that day. And what he was doing, I think, was just feeling out the different communities for what mandates they have in place, what mandates they would be willing to put in place. And at that time, on the 21st, only one of the Southeast communities had adopted mandatory masking, for instance, and that was Juneau. And they did that July 20th. During our discussions, the system mayor that they just had a meeting shortly before the 21st about masking, and that mandatory masking mandate failed with a 4-3 vote. The Ketchikan mayor and Borough mayor talked. It sounded like they had a town hall meeting at the Penn Ferry Center, and the majority of the people at that time were against mandatory masking. And when it was my turn to speak, I went over the numbers that Petersburg had experienced to that date, and mentioned how long it was taking to get the test results back from the airport, and up to 2 weeks. And I mentioned the one case about someone coming to town, testing, going out and camping in the Forest Service cabin, coming back, going home, and then they get the results and they're positive. So one good thing that came out of that discussion, or me mentioning that to the governor, was a couple of days after the meeting, I got a call from Mayor Stevenson from Ketchikan. And he said there was an entity in Ketchikan that was looking at buying a machine that would do tests within, get results in a couple of hours. And he just wanted to reach out and let Petersburg know if and when that became available, that would potentially be an avenue for us to get test results sooner than what we are receiving them now. So I passed that information along to the manager. He passed it along to Commander Hagerman, and I'm not sure where the discussion has gone from there. I can't remember the name of the machine, a bio respiratory testing machine. So that was about it from that meeting. I think it was just the governor reaching out and seeing what municipalities had done and were willing to do. And that was for that part of the report. And then we're seeking letters of interest still from interested rural residents to serve on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board until October 6th. That's the municipal election. We still have 3 vacant seats, and if people are really interested, they should go down to the borough office and get a petition form or whatever signature form to get their name put on the ballot. And that is all I have today for the manager's report. Excuse me, that brings us to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The streets crew repaired 2 failing pilings under the Rasmussen Bridge, although the bridge deck planking remains sound and starting to deteriorate, and we're going to have to take a look at as far as what we'll have to replace in the next 1 to 2 years. They also worked and repaired a failing embankment in North Harbor snow dump. The slope was rebuilt with rock and some concrete placed on top. We've been having some HVAC issues here in the mini building. I think we've got them worked out. We found a vendor in Anchorage that specializes in the equipment that we've got, and so that's been a big help. Hopefully that will fix some of the problems we were having. The borough has been approached by PIA to sell 705 Ira 2, the vacant lot, to Clinton Haida Regional Housing Authority directly for $36,500. The property had previously been determined not needed for a public use, was included in a public land sale authorized under Resolution 2016-14, but had no interested buyers. Clinton Haida and PIA have received COVID-19 grant funding to alleviate overcrowding and address housing insecurity and wish to construct a duplex on that property. The property would be purchased by Clinton Haida, and ownership would be transferred to PIA upon completion of the duplex construction. They will be asking the Assembly to approve a direct sale at the August 20th Assembly meeting. Water Department staff has been busy marking underground water lines in preparation for PIA's sidewalk project on 12th Street, Houghton. Thanks to Reed Brothers Construction, they achieved substantial completion on the Casino Street sewer project with only 2 items to finish up. Actually, they have already finished up. Project area looks good, the sewer main is operating as designed, and the neighborhood is back to being quiet again. The department will be working with Alan Burke to close out the project. Portion of the Petersburg power distribution system experienced an outage on Saturday, July 25th. A porcelain insulator on a cutout broke and caused a fault there by opening the T62 breaker, or feeder, excuse me. This feeder powers homes and businesses from Scow Bay to the core of town. Power and light line crew replaced the broken cutout and restored power to all affected within an hour. Power and light has continued on the finishing up the substation refeed project. The recent good weather allowed the line crew to rework the feed to Hammer Sluice Street a step prior to demolishing the span. And as I look out the window, I think we're almost done with that. Hydro lakes are full and spilling. Crystal Lake has been above and below the spillway, but within 2 or 3 feet, either way, for a couple of weeks, going back and forth as the rain goes. So we're in good shape there. Tidy Lake is spilling at 1,400 feet of elevation, and Swan Lake is being operated via spill control gate to maintain an elevation of 342 feet. And is up on the splash guards. So good news on all of our hydro. Borough's grants to nonprofit arts organizations, Midcop Dance Troupe, and Boston Museum will be matched by the Rasmussen Foundation. Each organization will receive an additional $10,000. So thank you to Rasmussen. Reopening has occurred at the community center. Pool has been open for a while. We're in the middle of finishing up plans for the weight equipment. A lot of patronage during the morning swim, averaging 12 to 14 people the first few days, and it's dropped off since then. Not many using the mezzanine, so we'll see how that goes. And we are attempting to add shower usage to our reopening plan. I believe that is now done, so people can take a shower down there. We've moved some fitness equipment into the activity room and treadmills into that room to make kind of a cardio room for folks. We spread out and extended into the cardio section of the weight room, hoping to reopen the fitness equipment this week, and kind of depends on just getting everything done that makes our mitigation plan work. Sheila Manor has been working on a facility reopening plan to allow outside visitors to assisted living. This is kind of tricky. Both the residents and family have requested to be allowed visitation, and it's affecting their mental health in a lot of ways. So we need to do something here. Sheila and her staff have done a great job with FaceTime and everything that's available, but folks kind of want to see their family. So we're working through that, and hopefully we'll come up with a good plan that'll still keep everybody safe. Thanks to Petersburg Medical Center staff, which did voluntary asymptomatic testing on residents and staff at the Manor on July 17th. I think the results have come back, and we're in good shape so far. The compressor in the assisted living boiler room died. Brian Haley was able to help us out, and Taylor and Sons are on their way to come and replace the new compressor that we had already had on hand as a spare. Assisted living and elderly housing fire panel, the supply card for the power for the panel failed. It needs to be replaced. Johnson Controls kept it ordered and should be here sometime this week. In the meantime, we have been having the staff do hourly fire checks in both buildings, documenting and faxing the fire marshal daily, working through there to make sure that the place is kept safe. The library's Art Education Endowment received a major donation from former Petersburg resident John McKay, founder of the fund. The balance of the fund now exceeds $119,000. This fund provides financial assistance to the library that is spent exclusively on art and cultural programs. The annual interest earnings provide a stable, ongoing funding source to enhance arts programming at the library. So again, thanks to John McKay. And the library has been launched a podcast that archives our weekly radio programs. You can subscribe on iTunes or listen at http://psglib.org/podcast. And our summer reading program ends on August 11th. And so those of you interested in that, please get involved. And that's it for my report.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions of the manager on his report? Okay, hearing none. Item 14, unfinished business. There are no items under that category today. That brings us to 15. Item 15 on the agenda into new business. First item under new business is Resolution 2020-13. This is a resolution approving the expenditure of $778,000 from the CARES Act Special Revenue Fund for Petersburg School District personnel costs, technology equipment and PPE/disinfection supplies in response to the continuing COVID-19 health emergency. I would entertain a motion to adopt this resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, motion's been made by Member Busey, I believe, seconded by Member Lynn, and there was another second. So we have a motion and a second. That brings us to discussion on this topic. Any discussion or questions? And I just have one. I'd like to ask if the Superintendent Erica Kluge-Painter is still on the line, available to answer questions, if there are any.
She is. Scott, if you could please unmute Erica Kluge-Painter.
The line is now open.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So, Erica, I don't know if there will be any questions, but I just had you unmuted, and we just got to the resolution for to talk about the request of the CARES Fund. So, any discussion by assembly members?
Yes, if I might, Mr. Mayor.
Member Lynn.
Yeah, and the question would go to Erica. Has this request been approved by the school board, by your policy committee?
The request has not been approved specifically by the school board. This has just come through our regular, financial department here.
Is it on your agenda for your next meeting?
It's not officially on the agenda. We made a request in June, similarly based off the needs that we have identified, through our regular process. So school board members are well aware of the request. I certainly ran it all past them, but it has not been formally adopted in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions of the superintendent? Sure, Mr. Mayor. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any questions for Superintendent Kluge-Painter, but what I would like to do is recognize the efforts from the admin team of the school district trying to create a workable educational system for our students in this pretty unworkable world we're dealing with right now in terms of travel, education, etc. And for those listening at home, Erica, you cut me off, so I'm speaking out of line. Countless hours have been spent by people trying to develop this so we can give our kids the best education possible. It's an unfortunate situation that we need to make adaptations to our educational system right now. But almost certainly be voting yes, because there are no guarantees in how education is going to be looking nationwide this fall. There's no way we can guarantee that X, Y, or Z will work. Everyone's just trying their best, and I think using this CARES money to support the school district right now, we're doing our best to take a shot at giving our kids good education. That's what the goal is all about. And I speak about it as an assembly member and as a parent, wanting to have the most workable solution for families and kids right now. So I'll definitely be voting yes, and I appreciate the efforts by the district.
Any other discussion or questions of the superintendent by assembly members?
Mayor?
Member Busey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did get a letter from the president of the school board. Originally I was so hesitant to kind of vote on this. For me, if I get a request from the school board, it makes me feel better that the school board has spent some time looking at this. I talked to one member of the school board today and one yesterday, and they're comfortable with this. We see that letter. One of the questions I have is that, so we're looking at like $750,000, in addition to the 1.8 So is this $778,000, is this a one-time thing, or are we looking, is this going to expire in November, December, and we'll be looking for additional requests? And then I had a few other questions regarding the additional teaching staff, but I'll just wait to hear the first answer and go from there. Thank you.
Erica, are you on the line?
I am. I don't know if it's muted. Can you not hear me?
Yeah, you're coming in fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so thanks for the question, Jeff. It is, at this time, this is a one-time request, and as you can see from that, you guys already know the date's on December 31st, so really we're plunging into this, looking at staffing and knowing that, we're hopeful for the next bill that's coming through from the Fed, supposed to be coming out with another school allocation here in the fall. We don't know what that will look like. This has been part of the challenge throughout the spring and summer related to this whole issue of staffing and, how to adequately prepare, where we are, essentially taking a lot of leaps of faith here, trying to move through this and, funding, decisions being made at times that are later than when we, are expecting to start providing education for our kids. So that's been extremely challenging this year. So I would say that if this funding goes through and it's approved, this, we're really looking through December 31st. Now the equipment and supplies and materials, of course, are hopefully, they're here. So that's those kinds of, allocations would be more of the one-time allocation. But the staffing is, that would be something we're going to have to look into our own budget. We could potentially be coming back to the borough. We're hopefully going to be getting another federal, allocation, but it looks to be September, maybe even October, which is really unhelpful for schools that are trying to start up in August and September. So that's as much as we know right now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a follow-up question is if the borough doesn't, or the CARES Act funding doesn't come through, how would we be expected to pay for this additional funding? Are we looking at some type of revenue enhancement, or just trying to sort a few things out here? Thank you.
Who's the question for, Member Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess whoever can answer it, I guess he's the superintendent.
I would say that, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say that I've discussed this a bit with Steve and Jody, just kind of brainstorming through that, and I would say that it's possible we would clearly be looking at our own fund balance at that point, and then we would potentially be coming back to maybe look at secureable school funding, if that was the only available amount of money.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this resolution for the funding? Well, if there's no other questions, I had a question, same as Member Lynn, so that's been answered already about how this has been vetted by the school board, and I guess that doesn't really throw up a big red flag for me, but I would have liked to have seen it vetted through the school board. And then one of the other questions I have to the superintendent. So you're talking about new positions, teachers, and I guess we don't know how long this situation is going to last, but if we hire new teachers, would they be permanent, or would their contracts be just until this situation went away, or what's the position on that?
Thanks for that question. Yes, the positions at this point will be posted as temporary positions, and that's kind of the ebb and flow of this whole issue. So, our goal would be to maintain the teachers that we are able to potentially hire, and they would provide that support, whether it's in person or remote, and provide collaborative support to teachers and the students and families as we're moving through this, possibly changing, in person and remote, and depending on quarantines and mandates and all those kinds of things. So at this point, they would be temporary conditions.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I guess this answer would probably be for the clerk, or not the clerk, but the finance director or the manager. So we have 2.4 million roughly left in this CARES fund balance that the borough received, minus the 150-ish, so 2.3 million. Was any of this money going to be used for borough functions other than the school? And will this expenditure, if we vote to give this $780,000 to the school, will that affect our plans, or do we even have any concrete plans for the money? Steve or Jody?
I'll start off and Jody can jump in.
Okay.
Steve. We didn't have concrete plans, Mr. Mayor. We were actually going to offset our first responder salaries, and which allows us to, cover those costs, both regular and additional, that have impacted us because of COVID. That allows us to keep the general fund in a healthy balance, and potentially that money could be used going forward for things like school bond debt reimbursement. The general fund, not CARES fund, which is not allowed. So, again, not very specific, although we have been talking about, potential utility rebates. We've been talking about, maybe another grant program for businesses, and clearly if there's fewer amounts of money in that fund, then we have to look harder at adding anything else to what we're already doing. Jody, can you jump in?
The only thing I would add is probably an allocation to the medical center at some point if they need it.
Yeah, good point. Forgot about that.
Right, but we haven't had that request yet, to my knowledge. I'm just wondering if we vote to dedicate the $780,000 to the school, if there's enough money left for us to potentially move forward with our plans for the first responders and to hopefully cover their expenses during this time, and have money left, like you said, to have a healthy general fund coming in the next budget cycle.
Well, Mr. Mayor, this is Jody Howe. It all depends on a few things. It depends on how much the medical center needs. It depends if the school needs more. It depends on if something, there's a lot of unforeseen things that could happen. If the medical center asks for $750,000 and we want to do something with grants, we were looking at like $600,000 of grants. There wouldn't be enough to code public safety, EMS, first responder expenses for the remaining end of the year. So it's an ebb and flow. So.
Yeah, the very fluid position here. So, and I was thinking about this today, and I fully believe in school funding education. And looking at what Congress is doing right now, they're pretty far apart between the Democrats and the Republicans of how much money they're going to fund and when they're going to fund it. And it appears like funding that will be dedicated to schools and the medical centers. I guess one question for the superintendent would be, would it work to, instead of giving the whole $780,000 to divide it up by the number of months that you need it and give you, incremental payments in case you get money from the federal government to come up with another stimulus package? Just trying to, I don't know, be playing devil's advocate, but keep as much money in the balance as we can. So, I guess that's more of a thought than a question. But would that potentially work?
I think the only issue that might come up with that, and I do know what you're saying, and it's kind of like what I was saying about the decision possibly being made in September by the feds about what might come to the schools in that sense. Is the cost, the outlay that for the majority of this is really happening, now, and actually a lot of it has already taken place because we've been trying to stay ahead of, ordering and planning for this in person. So we've been moving forward with some of these purchases because we just knew we would need them, regardless if we're trying to do these things in person. So that's the only problem with that. Is just the outlay is happening, now. I mean, the hiring teachers, the finishing up on technology, making sure that we're getting the right custodial staff, and preparing for all those things. So that's the only caveat I guess I would say to that. So I'm not sure if that would help our situation in that sense.
Okay, thank you for the responses. So any other discussion on this?
Yeah, Mayor, if I can.
Member Lynn and Member Bucci?
Yeah, yes, Mayor, I had some of the same questions along the line that you're at. When we look at the funds we have available, we don't know what's going to happen with the future here. If we had an outbreak, obviously we're going to have to do more testing and do a lot more. It's going to cost a lot more, and to keep our businesses. And then I'm going to turn to the businesses. There's probably need for another type of package to help some of our businesses in town that probably needs to develop. And back to something you said earlier, or I guess maybe the manager said, if we got the school bond debt that we have to look at next year, what can we do to preserve ourselves or preserve our funding such that we do not have to pass that school bond debt along? Going back to something that the superintendent talked about, I can see the point she's trying to make is that when you have to make commitments to hire people up front here, and I can see where the needs for some of that money comes from, but I also think there's a need to look in the future as to do some kind of a review on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bucci?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, I think we need to fund the school request. We can make up, if there's an issue about more funding coming in and the borough doesn't have to kick in, we can deal with that next year in the budget process. But yeah, right now, let's do it. I mean, the schools are under a great bit of pressure to kind of try and get open so that families have an option for their kids so that the education process can continue. So yeah, I think we should do it. We have time this fall or winter to deal with any kind of financial issues that we need to address in the spring. So, yep, I'm all in. Thank you. I appreciate Eric and honest, grateful of what's going on. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have one question.
Member Tremblay? Is that you or Member Morrell?
Member Morrell.
Okay, let's go ahead, Member Morrell.
This is a question for Erica. Without this additional funding, would you guys be able to operate as close to normal hours throughout the year as possible, assuming that we're in a green or low risk situation?
At this time, we do not believe that is possible. The goal being at this point, we're looking at a slow start, at a modified kind of A and B possibility, and the positions that we would be posting or hoping to post would be supporting that Sorry, back to Kathleen. Is it all right? Sorry, it sounded kind of funny. There's some background. Is it on my end or your end? Sorry.
I can't determine where it's coming from. There's like 8 people on the line, so.
Okay. Well, I'll try again.
Thank you.
So we are we would be looking at providing, hiring teachers and support staff that would be able to help in this initial opening, even though it's slower than we want and fewer kids on campus at one time. But that is our goal, is to figure out the best way that we can, do that in a way that's practical as possible with all the protocols and just the logistics involved. We don't love all of these logistics and all the protocols, but it is what it is. So we are trying to figure out the best way to do that. Of course, especially with younger kids, that's really a challenge. In general, they're busy, they move, this is going to be difficult. So we're, and not just getting them into the building, but also providing that, an educational experience that is valuable and robust and really meets the kids' needs. So trying to do this, we're going to have those staff members that are also available to help when the kids are off time, because teachers that are teaching in the classroom will have a full day of teaching. They will just have smaller groups to try to work through all these logistics. So we're going to need some support for the regular classroom teachers. We want to do more outreach and support, especially with our families, because we know that was very challenging last spring for a lot of families and people with young children. It's extremely difficult. Middle and high school students have an easier time dealing with remote learning. They just do, and we have good systems in place for that. But the challenge is truly kindergarten through 5th grade, and we feel that, we know that. So the goal being that we could, we're hoping to be able to expand those opportunities for kids on site, provide additional, keep adding to those learning opportunities for kids to be in the building with their peers, and additional staff that can be, reallocated to be looking at smaller groups in the building and just continuing to expand that way. I think the biggest concern we have, and I addressed that earlier, is just the sustainability factor. So much as I would love to wave my magic wand and say we're all coming in, August 31st or whatever day we end up trying to pull this thing off, it is not, trying to pull that all back, I think would be even more challenging for families and for students and for staff. We're trying to plan and prepare for things that we're just still not sure are coming at us. So, we're trying to aim down the middle of that road. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Do you have a follow-up, Member Morrell, or not answer your question?
No, I think that answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, Member Tremblay, do you have input?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank you, Erica, and the school board for all the work you and the whole team have been doing. Thank you for the work session that happened, and to KFSK for hosting it, for anyone that wants more background on the decisions the school's been making. I think it's important that we support this. I share the concerns thinking about the upcoming unknown costs and other ways. The community is in need in a lot of different directions right now, and I understand feeling like we want to try to save this money for some of those unknowns, but the urgency of the school's request, given timing, given uncertainty of what's happening at the federal level, and given the burden that it's put on so many families, I think it's important that we support this and just keep a good dialogue going with the school and with other organized bodies in town about what they, try the best to keep the good lines of communication going so we can plan accordingly. But at this point, it's very hard to plan for anything. So operating in good faith with each other and respecting the work you put into the level of detail on this plan, to me, is very important. So thank you again for all the work you've been doing.
Okay, any other discussion or questions of the superintendent before I ask the clerk to call the roll? Debbie, will you call the roll?
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Brandy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, resolution 2020-13 passes unanimously with a 6-0 vote. That brings us back to the next item under new business. And this is the community meeting regarding ordinance 2020-19, an updated municipal code, chapter 3.72, civil emergency provisions. I don't want to get this on the floor. We have two different suggestions. The direction, I guess, originally was to give the staff direction to help us come up with a plan for this meeting. And the manager came up with a plan, and Member Lynn has come up with a plan. So we need to have a motion in the positive to support one plan or the other. So, that's the way I see it. So is there a motion? Mr. Bucci.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to take the city manager's recommendation for how the community conversation should go. I'm certainly available to amendments, but just for start with the conversation right there. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to support Manager Giesbrick's suggestions on how to hold a community information gathering meeting. Is there a second? Is there a second to go on the floor for discussion?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Bucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. And looking at both of these different ideas, in my mind, they could be put together, and melded together or whatever to come up with a plan. But we need to at least, I think, come up with some kind of a baseline on how we want to move forward so we can get this advertised and organized and get public input that we want. So any discussion on these two plans or amendments to Member Giesbrick or Manager Giesbrick's suggestions?
I have some thoughts.
Okay.
To me, the biggest difference is who moderates the conversation, as well as it looks like on the manager's outline, there is room for being specific about the COVID response. And to my mind, I would like to make an edit to this. Personally, I like the idea of it being a outside moderator, maybe from the radio and maybe the paper moderating as well, just to keep the conversation flowing a little bit smoother, so we can all be participants in that. And then on the second point, because this issue came up to us because we are in the middle of responding to a global pandemic, but it is something that we needed to deal with as an assembly anyway. And so personally, I would prefer finding a way to separate the COVID discussion from the discussion of the emergency response. And so that's my personal preference. I know we'll probably use our current situation as reference point for understanding how we're all navigating this, but that's kind of my thoughts, and I'm excited to hear what other people have to think about it.
Any more input?
Yes, I have. I agree with Chelsea on removing the COVID portion of it. This is supposed to be broader than our current situation, and I realize, just like she said, that this was brought up because of the situation we're in currently, but it's not supposed to be, it's supposed to be more of an overall. So I would like that to be removed as well.
Okay, so a little bit of input. I have, I think maybe a third party fielding questions and running the meeting is a good idea, but then we have to, as an assembly, digest the information that we get out of this and then take that forward to the third reading. I would think that's how that would work. As far as, getting the manager's breakdown of the meeting, get an update from Carlton and Sandy and the DOT team and have our attorney on the phone. I think those are good ideas, but I think it should be more questions of them instead of them giving a presentation. So, if their views on it, I guess we need everything going. So, any other discussion? And then we have to kind of come up with a time frame. Bennett?
Thanks.
Yep.
I'll go forward. A couple things I enjoy. Thank you. I like the idea of gathering questions from the community in advance of the meeting. Similarly, like how we've done through candidate forums, really makes for efficient use of our time, and in terms of being able to adequately research questions asked of participants. I'm fine with a neutral party moderating that, and as you said, Mr. Mayor, we'll be digesting that information and taking it forward to the third reading sometime after that. So I like Member Tremblay's idea on that one. My only hang-up, though, and it's a logistical one, is under meeting location, number 4B, public can come in person or call in GCI moderated line. I struggle with that one only in the context of, I don't know, Debbie or Steve or some answers that for me is what would the logistics of that be? Because at face value, it kind of flies in the face of all the medical advice being given from Dr. Zink, the governor, et cetera, and I wanted to get some clarification if I could on that.
Mr. Mayor, may I respond?
Yes, manager.
Sure. It was not going to be easy. The concept was going to basically put the podium right at the doors entering the assembly chambers and only allow one member of the public in at a time. And then have to have staff out in the hallway to try to keep everybody socially distancing in our kind of reception area. And then somebody downstairs controlling the flow so that we don't have 40 people that try to come in all at the same time. Clearly, anything done in person adds a lot of complexity. But if I remember right, that was kind of part of the direction the Assembly given us, was that they wanted an in-person option. So that's why it's in there.
Well, thank you, Steve. That clarifies that. I'll very clearly state I think that's an objectively bad idea. I wish we were in a time right now where we were all sitting in assembly chambers and we had a gallery full of people there to speak and interact, and that's really makes for a better meeting. But again, it pretty much flies in the face of really all medical advice we're getting right now. So my only real hang-up is I would not be entertaining the live meeting for that. Thanks.
Any other input?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Yes, Member Lynn.
I think there's 3 decision points here to make. Are we going to use an outside moderator? 1. 2, how are we going to handle the questions from the public? Because if you remember back, there was a number of folks who asked us questions which, 1, we weren't able to answer, and 2, they were really very valid questions, but we weren't able. So are we going to allow some interaction between the public and the experts on it, and or make maybe have somebody make a short upfront presentation? And then the third part, the third question I think comes up is what date are you going to pick? Were you going to pick to do this? And I guess I'd put a fourth in there is the same one that member Stan Greger asked is, are we going to do this in person or are we going to do this remotely? Thank you.
Yeah, good point, Rita. When we had the discussion at the last assembly meeting and voted to postpone the third reading of this ordinance, I was hoping we, could have a public forum, but that's not realistic. Where do you have it? And as I give that more thoughts, I agree with Member Stan Greger on that. Moderator, I agree with, but I don't think it should be someone from the media. I think we might be able to find someone in town that has moderated meetings before that could be a neutral person, so I don't know how we go about finding that person. Reach out to the public and ask. It'd be nice if we didn't have to spend any money to get a moderator. As far as getting the question, we need the questions from the community to be basically put to us and somewhat answered by who, I'm not sure. Administration or as best they can, staff, and then have those questions and answers that was part of the manager's way the meeting was going to take place, or how it was the structure of the meeting. So I hope the public listening. Hang on to the meeting, and I'll go on the floor. So we need to come up with a moderator and the location and the date. I would think, what is a realistic date? Could we have it? We need to have it by the end of this month, I would think, and it's definitely going to be not the same time as the regular meeting. Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've entertained motions over the last couple of months about COVID funding, and I mean, if the intent of the assembly is to have a moderator kind of help us wander through this path, there's money available to make it happen. I think we should try that path. And, we're seeing lots of letters from folks who have questions about, I think it's probably time to have folks who have questions send them in. There might be a spot that the city clerk can kind of library these letters and questions, and then at some time city staff can determine if they're legal questions or political questions or health questions. I think we can do this. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's just a matter of, spending some time and making sure we get the questions that the community has answered. I think that no matter what happens, there's going to be a certain section of the community that is never going to be happy with whatever we're deciding. But at least it will give the community a chance to kind of, send their questions in, and they'll know when they get received, and they know that the assembly is honestly looking to answer some of their questions that they haven't been answered before. And I think we can do this. I don't have a problem at all with that, and I think we should be looking forward to get the will of the assembly to have an impartial person moderate this. I know there's a few people in town who have done this in the past, and I think it's just a matter of a phone call here and there, and I think we should pay those folks because it's not going to be a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Okay, well, we could definitely advertise in town. I agree with Member Bucci that there are people that are trained in moderating meetings in Petersburg, and so if we reach out, maybe we'll have more input than we think we'll get on that. And then advertise, have questions from the public sent in, and if they have specific questions to certain entities, whether it's the medical center or the EOC or Sandy Dixon or health nurse, whatever, then send those in, and we'll try to get those answered, and then we'll have the questions and answers before our meeting. So is there any other input on how we should go forward with this? We've thrown out a couple different ideas. I think it might be the consensus of the assembly to have a moderator. So I guess since this is a action item on the floor, maybe we should handle these one at a time, these changes to the plan. Member Lynn.
Yeah, well, I lost my partial thought here related to that. You were talking about a moderator. There's a couple ways to go about this. I think also we should go back, and if people have particular sections of the policy that they would like to see change for client, we need to, they can certainly send them in, and they should be, the manager or the clerk can make a compendium of all these changes of which we can deal with at the next meeting. But I certainly be willing, to go through everything. I'm sure all the members would. If there are some very legitimate points here that make sense to make changes, I think all of us would take a look at them and make changes. And so, yeah, I would hope that would be part of that, part of it too, is feedback there if they want to give it to us in writing.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Bucci.
Yeah, I don't want to limit the public's opportunity to make amendments to the ordinance that we're talking about. I think we should just have a free-flowing conversation with, if the community wants us to change a certain part of the ordinance, that's great. I don't think we should involve city staff, and city staff is they're the apolitical part of the local government, and I think we should let the community if that's what the majority of the assembly wants, let them have their say in what they'd like to see changed in this ordinance. I don't want to put the burden on city staff. It's up to the Borough Assembly to take that burden on and deal with it. We've all heard about different amendments, this, that, and the other, but I think this is the opportunity for the community and some of the assembly members to get a better feel about what the community is thinking about. I think that the real question that we have right now is that what are we going to have this meeting? We can talk about having a meeting at the end, between now and the end of August, but, we didn't just sort it out. We're going to do it in the middle of August, the end of August. If the mayor would like to be here for it, I know Carl's going to be out of town for a little bit, and he doesn't necessarily have to be there, but we need to, I think for me, the number one thing we have to figure out is, when are we going to do it? Are we going to do it next month? Are we going to do it in September, October? That's just, for me, it's just important to figure out a date, and once we get a date sorted out, we can start filling in all the blanks regarding the dates and the ordinance. So, for me, the date's going to be an important one. If we're going to do it between now and the end of August, that's great. Thank you.
The meeting has to take place before September 21st. Member Tremblay.
Yeah, if there were not a date, I would propose Tuesday, September 8th. From 4 to 7 p.m.
We have a meeting that evening.
What day of the week is it?
It is a Tuesday. We have a noon meeting that day, a noon regular assembly meeting.
Oh, I forgot about the holidays. Apologies. Okay, so...
Can I interject one thing? For choosing a date, it should be later in the week, so Member Gorham and myself could be here, that it doesn't conflict with the issue opening. Please.
Thursday, September 10th.
Thursday, September 10th.
That's a Thursday, that fits my schedule.
Which
One question.
time?
Clarification from the clerk. We need to make an amendment or make a motion for this date, or in this situation, we've got on the floor, can we just vote on specific items, in your opinion, and then just make that, you'll vote on? What's your take on that, Clerk Thompson?
I agree with you, Mayor Jensen, that we should take things one at a time, and since the motion was to approve the manager's proposal, things like where it says in 3A, the mayor runs the meeting, if it's decided that we want a moderator, we should amend that and then vote on that. We can pick a date and time and vote on that, but anything that's actually spelled out in the proposal, we should probably make amendments to.
I agree. So we have no date.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Bucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to amend my motion if possible.
Your original motion on that?
Yes.
Sure. What's the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, under 3A, I'd like to see it read, have a moderator run the meeting, And the meeting time would be the date that...
One topic at a time, though, because we're going to be voting on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Was there a second to the amendments? Again, sorry, Member Tremblay, for interrupting you there, but I just want to make sure we're going about this procedurally correct as we can, and then I agree with the clerk. So there's been a motion made to change the meeting structure, section 3A, and where the moderator runs the meeting and not the mayor. So is there a second to that? Second. Okay, discussion.
As far as selecting that moderator, should we, as individual assembly members, email the manager our proposed candidate and let the manager decide who the moderator would be? Is that the preferred method?
Mr. Mayor?
I would think we should choose the moderator at our next regular meeting, and we could gather names by then, but I think that should be a decision made by the assembly. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. If we have enough announcements or enough notice out there, whether it's in the newspaper or on the radio, the community knows we're looking for, maybe not just the community, but the region knows we're looking for a moderator to help us wander down the trail. It might be somebody from outside of Petersburg. But yeah, I think...
We never know. We don't know until we advertise, that's for sure. So, back to this amendment, is there any more discussion on the amendment to change section 3A of the manager's suggested format to have a moderator? If not, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
And Bob?
Yes.
Okay, so that has been changed. And now, Member Tremblay, would you like to propose a time, Member Tremblay?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment amending the meeting schedule. I propose Thursday, September 10th at 4 p.m.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, motion's been made to set a time for this special meeting, town hall meeting, whatever information gathering meeting, whatever you want to call it, to Thursday, September 10th at 4 p.m. Motion by Member Tremblay, seconded by Member Mucci. Discussion. I just have one thought to put out there. The date and the day of the week is fine, but we're trying to get as much public involvement as we can. Would maybe a little bit later be better so people can have time to get off work and then come? That's just a thought. Member Tremblay, I'll run that by you. You made the motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I share that thought too. I guess my thinking was that we were allocating 3 hours for it, and so 4 makes it a little bit of an easier schedule for us. But I'm completely open to amending to 5 or 5:30 or so if we want to go that route. A lot of folks also listen to us at their meetings anyway, so or at their workplaces, so they're stuck with us anyway.
Right. So, any other discussion on the time? Would 5:30 work for an appropriate time?
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if we give a big window there from 4 to 7 or 4 to 8, it would give people an opportunity to kind of be there if they want to be, or at least call in if they want to be. If you're working, that's great, I get that. But I think a bigger window of time gives, if we make that window real narrow, then you're going to have a bunch of people standing in line trying to communicate with the assembly. And I think if you make that window bigger, then I think people have an opportunity to kind of, to drive by and see who wants, if there's a spot. But I think the bigger the window, I think the better. So I think starting at 4 and I'm guessing we'll go until people are done talking. That's what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I can see you putting no time deadline on the length of the meeting. So, that proposed, that amendment or that motion has any more discussion to have it September 10th at 4 o'clock. Chime in. If not, will the clerk call the roll, accept that date?
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a couple different amendments here. We've chosen you as a moderator. We have a date set for the meeting. I would think as time goes on, we have agreed, I believe, to use the basic structure of the manager's format. Do we need to do anything else at this meeting, or can we have this as a possible action? Member Trimley, you have another amendment?
I do. I'd like to amend under 4F and G. I would like to remove those so that it isn't on, it is a phone meeting.
Perfect. Yeah, I agree. Is there a second for that motion? Second. Discussion. And that's to, the motion is to remove under meeting location, public allowed in the assembly chambers for number 3 point F, whatever that is, one at a time. And G is police officer help with crowd control, which we won't need if it's all by phone. So that's what we're voting on, is removing those from the meeting location.
Mr. Mayor, this is Steve.
Yeah, Steve.
Also that those in 4B, where it says public can come in person,
Yes.
I would recommend that that be deleted.
Will you be willing to add that to your motion, Member Trimley?
Yeah, I'd like to amend my motion so that meetings, number 4F and G are deleted, and 4B is edited to read public can call in on GCI moderated line.
Perfect. So that is the what we're going to be voting on. Any discussion on that motion? Clerk, call the roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
You bet.
Mark?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other amendments to the manager's proposed structure?
Mr. Mayor, I just want
I'd like to,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Is it member Morrell or member?
Let me translate again.
Okay.
I would like under 3B, where it mentioned Sandy doing the outline of the ICS system supposed to work, I would like to add assembly members will have completed FEMA 100 training prior to the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second is by member Stanton Greger.
Yes, sir.
Discussion.
Yeah, so I just wanted to explain my reasoning on that is this is a course that everyone part of the IC team is required to participate in, and I feel like the conversation will be a little more fruitful if we're able to bring easily answered questions already done from having taken that course, and we'll be able to get a little more in-depth with it with Sandy. But then I think the general outline that she does provide will help the public understand what it is that we're all talking about as well. So I was just trying to make sure that we do our due diligence as assembly members as well for the purposes of this conversation.
Any other discussion on that proposed amendment to make it mandatory for the assembly to take whatever the class was for the Member Lynn?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I've taken that class. I've been an incident commander. Why would I want to go back and do it again? That's kind of a question I have. I'm not sure it's necessary, is just where I'm coming from.
And I don't feel like I'm going to be told by a body that I'm going to have to take a specific class before I can be part of the discussion. I don't know what the time would be involved, but I don't have a lot of spare time on my hands. So I would be voting against this amendment. Is there any other discussion on this amendment? The requirement of taking the class that Member Trindley added to the section 3B. Clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
No.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Bob?
No.
Brandy?
No.
Jay?
Yes. Have you called for Member Bucci's vote yet?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so what is the tally? Is it 4-3 or?
4-2. Fails 4-2.
Okay, there's only 6, right? I got it. Okay, so that amendment fails, but we'll still have the meeting structure. Sandy Dixon will give a general outline of how the incident command system is supposed to work. Any other proposed amendments to the structure that we're going to use for the meeting structure and meeting location or meeting timing? I guess we have a timing set. Carl will be there. He occurs in early September. So we have from 4 to 7. But I would suggest 4 whenever it gets over. Any other changes proposed?
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Did we need to,
Member Lynn.
Yeah, I have one other thought, is that will we have somebody that will capture for us the proposed, if folks come forward with proposed changes or ideas that we need to take a further look at, will somebody be available to capture all those and make some kind of a compendium that we can all look at a later date before we do the third reading?
I think it's definitely a good idea before this meeting even, and I would hope that would be someone in the staff. That we have one address to send everything to, one person compiles all the information and shares it with the assembly, and as it comes in or whatever, but we don't discuss it amongst ourselves, at least then we have an idea of how to digest, the public's thoughts and ideas, because I think there's, I'm hoping there will be a lot of them. Maybe there won't. I guess. We'll find out in the future. Does that work for, not that I'm trying to overburden the administration, but I think that would be the center, a good location to gather information.
This is Steve. Yes, sir. I think that was the plan all along. And while I have the floor a little bit, Assembly Member Morrell had a statement about removing discussion on that's directly to pandemic. That's kind of still out there. If the Assembly wanted to address that, you'd need to change the title up at the top and also delete 3E, if that's what you have in mind.
need to address situations other than the pandemic, or do you want to have the pandemic involved in this meeting as well? I guess it's, like it says in the headline, in response to the Assembly instructing staff to conduct a community meeting, and it specifically says on the pandemic response emergency ordinance for Petersburg. Does anybody have any heartburn with that language being in there still? Or is there anyone who would like to make an amendment to try and remove that?
Yep, I would move to amend it to remove the language related to the pandemic and concentrate specifically on 2019, the emergency ordinance.
Second.
Okay, motion is made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Borough, so that would be removing the meeting on the pandemic response and section 3E, which PNC CEO Phil Hofstetter and Mary Michael, the health nurse, to a general outline on the medical issues associated with our COVID response. That could, they can still be available for questions or input, I would suppose. But is that the motion you made, Member Lynn, or you just want to change the title?
No, you are correct.
To remove section 3E as well?
Yes. And I do agree with you that we would want them available to answer questions because I know there will be some.
Correct. So, any discussion on that motion?
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor.
Member Sandberger?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm a little confused at the procedure, so bear with me. So if we're moving that language, we're going to be telling people who come in that they're concerned about our pandemic response. That's not, to keep it on topic and only talk about the resolution. I feel like, as long as people can still, that's what's on their mind, they want to talk about or have questions about it. Is the intent of this to remove that specific part of this discussion? Because I have a hard time envisioning that discussion in that meeting, not straying into that. We are living in a pandemic right now. I'm sure it's going to come up. I would not want to limit our ability to discuss it, is what I'm saying.
Mr. Mayor?
I can see your point there, Member Stanton Granger, but I would sure think that that would still be part of the topic. It just wouldn't be the title of the for the meeting.
Okay, I was about to clarify. I didn't want to find ourselves in an odd procedural situation where we have to stop people from going down that thread. The goal is to really promote open dialogue in this meeting with the public. So I don't want to limit that in any way. And if everyone feels comfortable with that language, and that's the intent of removing that language to still allow that as a part of a thread for people, then I'm fine with that, I guess.
Okay, Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think we should just kind of leave section 3E in. If the intent of the amendment is to remove the medical professionals from weighing in on issues associated with our COVID response, I think we're doing the community a disservice. So I'd like to see it left in. I'm not quite sure if the amendment is to take it out, but I definitely want to hear from Phil and Aaron about medical issues associated with our COVID response. So, thank you.
Can I chime in?
Member Tremblay, and then Member Morrell, I believe.
Thank you. I guess my thinking behind why I agree that we will be talking about the current pandemic in the context of this conversation. So I don't think that means that input won't be welcome from the public. I think my thinking is that the overall issues that people were bringing around the emergency ordinance were very substance-based, procedural matters of municipal code, jurisdiction, and overall jurisprudence, basically. And so, in my mind, that's where having Phil and Aaron on the phone to help answer the practical, the applications of how these ordinances could be applied in their current situation, or overall logic behind some of what maybe Carl brings up or what questions come in. But in my mind, trying to slightly disassociate the issue of the emergency response to what it is, which is something that many communities already have standing as a perennial emergency ordinance for any situation. And so I think it's important that we try to understand this as that, being here to serve our community in any unprecedented situation, not just the current one. And so to my mind, having if we want to have a whole second separate conversation regarding the overall, and we will be having it when we have the community protective plan brought before us. If we want to have a second one on our specific Petersburg COVID plan, that's, in my mind, a different conversation than where the emergency ordinance conversation needs to be. And both will take a substantial amount of time. So in my mind, that's where I was coming from, with not necessarily excluding it entirely, but trying to stick to the true topic at hand, which is the emergency ordinance.
Any other discussion on the proposed amendment to change the title and to remove section E?
Mr. Mayor, looking at that, at the same time, I think I have to say we'd have to remove item D, 3D also, because that relates to the same issue.
3D?
3D. Carl does a general outline of what has happened up to date regarding the various state and local alerts and mandates.
So that would be a separate amendment unless you want to amend this amendment right now.
Yes, I did. That's what I was trying to do anyhow, is to amend my amendment, yes.
I actually think that
Can you get recognized, Member Tremblay? Can you get recognized first?
Apologies.
You have the floor, but it's better than just chiming in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can you have a point of order on the amendment?
Member Tremblay has the floor.
So, to my mind, I think Carl serves a really important role in the bringing to life what an emergency response looks like. It's policymaking in public, or policymaking in public, walking through how we as a borough have responded as an institution in the course of the pandemic as a case example of the emergency ordinance, or of the emergency ordinance role in the creation, or in the borough response, if that makes sense. So to my mind, Carl speaking is a really great way for bringing the abstract of what Sandy and Sarah will bring as the lawyer and to the expert on the ICS systems, and then Carl will be the one to land us in the reality of the moment, to my mind, Bob, for the idea of that further amendment.
Technically, we don't have an amendment, a second for Bob's amendment to the amendment, and I just think it would be cleaner, Member Lynn, if you don't mind, if we vote on the first amendment, and then if you feel necessary to remove section 3D, we do that in a different proposed amendment.
Good idea. Yes, good idea. Thank you.
Okay, without a second, then we're just voting on the first amendment from Member Lynn, seconded by Member Borough, I believe, to change the title and to remove E. So is there any other discussion on those particular actions? Okay, will the clerk call the roll? This is to change the title and to remove section 3E.
Jeff?
No.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, that 1 and Section E have been changed and removed. Is there any other amendments to this meeting structure?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to come back to 3D again. But rather than to throw it out, I would restructure that, because what I would do is I would amend it to have Carl present a general outline of why we need a long-term emergency ordinance and what we've learned from this particular event we're going into right now. I think that would be right on target with what we want to gain out of the community meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion is made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Borough. Let Carl still give a general outline of why we need an emergency ordinance and discuss what's happened in this particular instance that we're in right now. Is that pretty much how you want to word it, Member Lynn?
That's correct. In other words, why we need to now amend the ordinance we have on the books from what we've learned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that is the proposed amendment. We have a second. Any discussion on modifying Section 3D under meeting structure? Clerk, call a roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, so that amendment passes unanimously. So I think we're limited down to what we are looking for from this meeting. Is there any other proposed amendments? We have a date, we have some amendments to the meeting structure, meeting location, and means of attendance. So, and we will have one more meeting prior to our September 10th meeting, actually 2 more meetings. So we can always bring it up if we feel we need to address this again and make more modifications. And I think we're good enough to field questions and look for a moderator and go from there. That's my opinion on it. So if there's no other amendments, we...
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Steve.
Okay.
With the change to 3D, the Assembly might want to look at 3C, the last sentence about what Sarah was supposed to be doing. It seems to be repetitive now.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Lynn?
Yeah, I don't quite see it quite the same. Is that Carl, as I see it, Carl's coming from the perspective of the current event and what we've learned and what changes we need to make. Sarah's coming from a legal standpoint of where that comes from state statute and what we've had on the books and where, and the answer question to where she thinks we need to make changes. I see it as 2 different items.
Okay, well, if we don't have an assembly member that is willing to make a motion to amend that 3C, then we will leave it as it is, and we can always address it again if someone feels we need to put it on a future agenda. But so if there are no other proposed amendments, I would entertain a motion to approve our meeting structure and meeting location that was presented by the manager as amended. So is there any discussion on the main motion as amended? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a format for how we're going to conduct that meeting on 10th. Okay, that brings us to letter to the last Department of Education and Early Development regarding school average daily membership numbers for 2020-21 school year. And due to a possible lower than usual student count in our schools due to the COVID pandemic, the school district is requesting the Department of Education allow schools to use their 2019-2020 average daily membership numbers to calculate the state's funding formula for the 2020-2021 school year. Approval of this letter would support the school district's request. So I would entertain a motion to support this letter to the Department of Education and Early Development. So moved.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made in the second. Any discussion? This would definitely affect funding. So any discussion? Clerk, call the roll if there's no discussion.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, this passes unanimously. That's a request to send a letter to schools, the Department of Education and Early Development. Next item under new business, D, Petersburg COVID situation update letter to federal delegation. Assembly member Tremblay drafted this letter to our federal delegation to provide a status update on the COVID situation in Petersburg. I entertain a motion to approve this letter.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Motion's been made by member Tremblay, seconded by member Lynn. So member Tremblay, you drafted this letter. Do you want to explain or give your opinion of it?
Yeah, so I put it together after soliciting input from members of the EOC and reaching out to the Share Coalition specifically. So there's specific updates from Phil Hostetter with the hospital, and based on feedback I got from members of the Share Coalition, I put together a couple sentences towards the end emphasizing the increased need for certain aspects of social safety net in our community during this time. I'd actually be interested in making a motion to add a sentence on the, let's say, the third to last paragraph that begins with "in addition." I'd like to make a motion to add a sentence stating local businesses, I didn't have it by now. Local businesses will also be in need of ongoing support. A longer, one sentence, second sentence, a longer period of time in which to disperse CARES Act, or a longer period of time to disperse federal funding would be beneficial to local response.
Okay, so that's basically a amendment to add that language. Is there a second? Second. Discussion on the amendment to add that language?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think on that language, you know, it's pretty generic. And where I come from, I guess, is there's 4 or 5 pieces of looking at our business sector that really need to be added. And this is okay with me, but I don't think it addresses the real issues we have to deal with here that from our business sectors that we really need to put into the letter. Thank you.
Okay, I think with as fluid as this situation is, someone could probably come up with ideas. We could send a letter every meeting that with different language in it, but I agree the businesses do need to be talked about and asking for help. Any discussion on the amendment to add that language? Clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the main motion, as amended.
Okay.
If there's no questions, I have a question of,
Yeah, go ahead.
Member Lynn, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You had the floor.
Well, I'm just wondering, under long-term need, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 topics down, federal support of a partnership with the USDA and the Denali Commission to assist in funding requests for phase 2 of new facility, site selection, environmental study, and anyway, I wonder what facility is that referring to, Member Tremblay?
Do you mean the new hospital or the new / renovated hospital plan?
It's just federal support of a partnership with the USDA and the Denali Commission to assist in funding requests for phase 2 of a new facility. Is that the hospital? Or what facility are we referring to in that language?
Yeah, that's the updated hospital. So you're right, we could refine that. This was directly from Phil. It is referring to the new project since we are still midway through that. If we can put lines into our federal representatives that is an ongoing need for our community, I see that as, can never mention that too many times in my opinion right now.
Okay, well, maybe we should add in, and I can't make an amendment for phase 2 of the new hospital facility or Petersburg Medical Center facility. I don't know what that language the way it is. I didn't know what we're talking about until you clarified. So that would mean if everybody else is fine with the way it is.
Yeah, I could make an amendment to insert new medical facility into that line.
If you take that as a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion is made to second to have medical facility in the language between new and facility. So, any discussion on that? Let's call the roll.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Mucci.
And so that language is in there for us to support a new medical facility, is that correct?
To support funding, assistance funding request for phase 2 of new facility, which is site selection, environmental study, and full architectural design. So it's not to support getting grants to build a new facility, it's just to get to the next stage. Just like it says in the parentheses there. That's the way I'm taking it, unless there's another explanation that's clearer than mine.
Mr. Mayor?
And to be clear, in the presentation that was given to us with the site, even using the current location basically meant a new facility. So to my mind, it's not a matter of either, making a decision in that way. It's, so to my mind, that's where we're at.
Does that clarify, Member Mucci, what we're trying to do here? Or?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the letter?
Yes.
Member Lynn?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. If the very first sentence of this letter says, as the COVID-19 response continues, the Petersburg Borough Assembly, through its thought it appropriate to share immediate needs, that's not an immediate need. And so I would, at this point, I don't think it's appropriate to have it in there, if in fact, unless you want to revise the entire letter.
I guess we could remove the word immediate. Yeah, I don't know.
Or immediate and relevant?
Yeah, but if I might, I think Member Tremblay has a really good idea in the first part here, but it relates primarily to the hospital. And if we're talking about what we have as our needs are as a community from the COVID-19, they go much broader. And we have enough information right now that we can talk about. I know Liz can talk about our needs related to community in more detail on what we want to do for the businesses, what we need to do to protect fishermen's interest. You know, we'll have long-term loans, those types of things. And I really think that the letter, and we haven't addressed the school needs, and there was when you compared both the House and the Senate versions, there's a couple things in there that really should be brought forward from our perspective to help our interests here. I think from my perspective, I would like to see a more comprehensive letter using Member Tremblay's idea, but to cover everything we need in town and send that at a later date, maybe after the next assembly meeting.
Any other input? I see where Member Lynn is coming from. It just appears to focus on pretty much one topic, the healthcare needs and testing, etc. So,
I totally agree. I put this letter together before we had the full breakdown of the Senate House bills as they compared. So is it possible to table this? I guess because this is also a matter of urgency. The Senate could have passed the bill last week and didn't, so it could have almost been irrelevant entirely. I'm not sure if we have time to do a full edit and report before the next regular assembly meeting. And I'm not sure what if people would want a special meeting for the purpose of a more comprehensive community letter. So that's some of the background on that. Was a matter of timing. Having it ready for this meeting meant I had to have it by last Monday.
Yep. The timing, it doesn't feel like it, who I've talked to, it doesn't seem like the Congress is going to come up with anything before their recess, which starts, I believe, in the middle of the month. So I would think we'd have time to make additions to this letter. Maybe Liz would have some good input and just address it at the next meeting on the 17th. It just appears that way, but that's just my thought. So I guess we could...
Yeah, Member Tremblay, would you be willing to make a motion to table it and to have the staff try to make a more comprehensive letter for us?
Absolutely. I'll make that motion to table until next meeting.
It'd be better to postpone until the time certain, which is the next meeting, August 17th at 6 p.m. I don't know what the particular wrong tabling something getting off the table.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't know, about the procedure here, but just if we don't do anything on it, nothing will happen, and another letter could be brought before us at the next meeting. So, yeah, I don't know if we need to do anything, as long as we don't move forward with this letter.
Well, the maker of the motion, the drafter of the letter, has responded and is willing to, I believe, Member Drummond, to expand on the letter. Do you think August 17th would be too late, or?
We'll make it happen. Let's figure it out. We'll see. Can't predict what's happening in D.C. But yeah, I'm happy to table. Member Sandberger, is that the appropriate, or Deputy, is tabling the appropriate procedural route?
It moves to postpone until the second meeting
Correct.
Okay, I moved to postpone. Second, yeah.
Okay, so the member Lynn makes it, he asked member Tremblay if that was acceptable to her, and I believe it is, and so we consider that a motion, and member Lynn, are you willing to second that?
I'll second it, yes.
Yeah, I thought you did. Okay, so that's the deal, and we'll get more information, and I would assume member Tremblay will be involved in adding language to this with staff and Mr. Borough. So the vote is to postpone this until August 17th at 6 p.m.
Mayor Jensen, this is Clerk Thompson.
Yes.
I just wanted to throw out to the Assembly, we did have a motion and a second on the floor to add the word medical in between new and facility. We did not take a vote. I'm okay with that as long as the rest of you are.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, maybe just throw that language in there for the next version, Member Tremblay. Since we're postponing this and we're proposing to add language to it, I don't see the action of postponing this till August 17th. And is that acceptable to you, Clerk Thompson?
Yes, it does.
You have to take action on okay.
I don't think so, mostly because the maker of the motion agreed to postpone. So I think we're okay. I just wanted to throw it out there to make sure everyone was aware.
Right, thank you. So the motion, there's been a motion and a second to postpone this letter with modifications to August 17th at 6 p.m. Clerk, call the roll.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that motion to postpone passes unanimously. That brings us to item E, Petersburg's portion of a joint response compiled by the Alaska Municipal League to the State Alaska Marine Highway System Working Group. I entertain a motion to adopt this response. Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second to the motion? Seeing no second, I guess the motion fails. So this is going to be something we address, and Steve, please clarify. I'll wait for a second before we take no action on this, but Steve, you can probably explain this better to me. This is from Mill, and it's about ferry scheduling, proposed ferry scheduling, and their AML is trying to get municipalities' position on this proposed Alaska Marine Highway System calendar, 2020, and I believe it goes through December. Is that correct, Manager Giesbrecht?
Yes, sir. The head of that reshaping committee reached out to all of the municipalities to come up with a response. Nils from AML suggested that we come up with kind of a regional one and put together the PowerPoint presentation that was attached and had some information there from Petersburg. By the end of August, we're supposed to have a response to the reshaping committee. If the Assembly doesn't take a stand on this, then we will have no response.
Mr. Mayor?
See, that's what I thought that we were doing here, so it's kind of surprised. Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since there's no second, I don't understand what the discussion is about.
I was just trying to explain.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I was surprised there wasn't a second. So, Member Lynn, do you still stand with your motion?
I do, thank you.
And Member Borough, did you make the second, or was that Member Tremblay?
No, that was small.
Okay, thank you. So is there any discussion on this? It's just the reshaping committee, which consists of a few senators, I believe, and Southeast Conference, and an admiral, former admiral, running with the Coast Guard. He's the chair, I believe, of this committee. They're just looking to see if we're okay with this proposed schedule. And I don't, they're talking about weekly to Bellingham, twice weekly north. It's not very descriptive. I can't, I see the blocked out dates when they propose ferry service, but that looks like in December there's 4, 9, 13 days of service. So I don't know if I'm reading it incorrectly or anybody else has deciphered this a little bit better than I can. Any input, or is this an okay schedule? But I don't, like I said, I don't follow it. Member or Manager Giesbrecht, do you have any explanation on what the dates are that are blocked out?
I think it was their attempt to put a schedule together, and I think it's not overly accurate. I think the most important part of it was the statement that we needed at least 2 a week northbound to Juneau, and based on 1 southbound all the way to Bellingham. So if that's not sufficient, or the Assembly wants to weigh in and say what the minimum level of service is, which is what they're asking for, then we need to change that.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense to look at the weekly to Bellingham and twice weekly north, but that's a lot better than any service we received since last October until currently. Any more input?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Beach.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's my hesitation about voting on this is that, this working group is put together by a bunch of folks who aren't really listening to the public. Some of the folks who are on this group haven't been to too many meetings, and, I think you see community apathy about a plan that's being put in place. So it's kind of hard to get behind something like this when, to me, it doesn't appear that they're taking the community seriously. So, thanks.
Any other input? And this is just for us to approve, basically once a week service to Bellingham and twice weekly north, which sounds like that this is going to be done later in August by the working group, and then we'll probably have more information. We'll see, who knows where we'll go, funding and et cetera, what kind of service we'll end up with. But I think it's important that we respond to this working group that the governor put in place and say yes or no, this is the idea. That's my input. So if there's no other input, will the clerk call for the roll, and the motion is to accept this proposal.
Yes, and Mayor Jensen, before I do the roll call, I needed to let you know that I received a message from Member Stanton Greger, who had to return to work, so he is off the line.
Okay. Thank Jay for attending. Since I have a long meeting, I understand. So, will the clerk call the roll on this acceptance of this response? Approving the schedule.
Chelsea?
Schedule.
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Next thing on the agenda is communications. There are many communications listed from July 19th up to July 29th. Those are at the Borough website. They're on this agenda. If anybody from the public wants to go through and read all of those communications, they're available. And we won't go through them and read them all, but they are posted. That brings us to item J, DNR public review. This is under communications. Of 5-year schedule of timber sales. Comment period open until September 4th of 2020. So that's just communications, and there is a And so that's on our website as well, and you can comment until September 4th. So we just want the public to be aware that that is out there. There's another public notice, and it's on Pebble Project Final Environmental Impact Statement. Comment period open until August 24th, 2020. And then again, that's available to the United States Army Corps of Engineers, Alaska District. And I would assume there's 4 pages, and there must be a link or an address on there to send your statement. The notice of availability for the Pebble Project Final Environmental Impact Statement. So maybe it's just maybe it just makes us available. I don't know if there's a comment period or not. Do you see that anywhere in there, Debbie, as you look at this?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
It's the final, no comment.
Oh, it is a no, I think they are taking comments, aren't they? I thought so, yes. Let me look at it real fast.
Well, anyway, this is just a communication from the Corps of Engineers. It's a special public notice, so we just want to make sure the public got this. The expiration date is August 24th. Should have looked at this in a little more detail.
Yes, okay, it does say the second to the last paragraph that the Army Corps of Engineers continues to seek any comments concerning potential historic properties that may be affected. Comments regarding the draft PA or potential historic properties should be sent to blah, blah, blah. Let's see. All comments should be postmarked no later than the expiration date of this public notice to become part of the record and be considered. So the expiration date of this... Yes, August 24th.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was, without reaching the details. So anyway, the public listing, that's on our website. You can go and get the address to send your comments until August 24th. Assembly discussion items, there are none listed, but the next item under that is 17A, which is Assembly member comments. Do any Assembly members have comments that weren't on today's agenda, or any thoughts they would like to present to the public? Okay, seeing none, that brings us to recognitions, and I put this under recognitions, and I'd like to recognize the responders to the car accident, and over a week ago, I guess it was, or maybe it was a week ago, with the loss of the 4 lives. Over the top to respond to something like that, I can only imagine. I just don't think I could partake in anything like that. But I would like to recognize the Alaska State Troopers, Petersburg Volunteer Fire Department, Petersburg Fire and EMS, Petersburg Police Department, and the U.S. Forest Service law enforcement officers. So thank you for your service, and well, I got the phone saying thank you. So are there any other recognitions?
I have one.
Member Tremblay.
Yes, I'd like to thank Clerk Thompson for all the work that you do keeping us going. I think of your job as doing needlepoint while herding cats at the same time, and it is often very visible, and so I wanted to take that moment to thank you so much for all that you do for our community and for us as an assembly. Thank you is very insufficient, but it's better than nothing, so thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Okay, are there any other recognitions? I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion made by Member Sin and seconded by Member Tremblay to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.